Hello, everyone, and welcome into the first ever edition of the Prep Extra Rewind Show, bringing you all our instant reactions, analysis, and hot takes of the playoff picture here in Nebraska high school football. I am your host, Jeff Ekstrom, and along with me is our fearless leader and sports editor, Clark Grell, and Luke Maloney. You all know him on the Prep Extra podcast, along with me, head Prep Extra writer. And gentlemen, what an opening week of football. We're going to go right into it. I mean, you guys had your respective games we'll talk about here in just a bit. But first, I think we got to lead off with Millard South losing to Omaha North, who, in fact, did not even play football last year. They beat number one Patriots 49-42. The Williams connection, Jordan Williams to Keyshawn Williams for 36 yards with 16 seconds left to give that game-winning score. I mean, guys, what an effort by Omaha North. Just absurd performance.
Yeah, crazy. And I'm glad you mentioned the Prep Extra podcast, because let us not forget that I predicted Millard South to be my Class A state champion just a couple of days ago. So safe to say, I definitely did not see this coming. Omaha North, they played a pretty close game against Millard South a lot earlier in the year, lost by about 20 points, pretty respectable. You think about going up against the number one team. Well, how about they just get hot, take a big winning streak to go into the playoffs, make it, they got nothing to lose. It's the number one team, right? They came out there, gave it their absolute best shot. And that is just a wild result. I mean, I don't know how far you have to go back to find the number 16 seed beating number one in the opening round of the Class A playoffs. It's just nuts.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, Millard South was without Gage Stinger for a couple weeks there, right, Luke?
Yep, last 2 weeks.
And he was back down. He threw 6 touchdown passes, so it's not like they were beating a Millard South team that was, that was not at full strength. I mean, Millard South was at full strength, so that was impressive. And especially, like you brought it up earlier, I mean, Omaha North did play them really close during the regular season. I believe it was tied at halftime, right? Or something like that. Very close, I mean, obviously Omaha North had some moment or some confidence there that they could do this.
And it's interesting, too, just the adversity this Omaha North team had, trailing by 14 points in that fourth quarter and be able to make that comeback. Just props to Omaha North. They're used to the success, of course, winning a couple state titles a few years ago. And I mean, it just shakes the total landscape of this whole entire bracket. Obviously, I think now the favorite going into the quarterfinals on has to be Bellevue West, who won pretty handily tonight. But again, it just shakes up the whole landscape.
Definitely. Yeah. I kind of drew out the quarterfinal matchups just on a notepad, and, it's kind of wild. You got Omaha North going to North Platte. You got Gretna tentatively at Elkhorn South if they wrap up that win over Kearney, Grand Island at Bell West, and Burke at Westside. So really, I mean, any of those 8 teams, obviously Bell West and Westside, the two strongest over the course of the regular season. But I think at this point, everybody's going, hey, if 16 can beat one, what's stopping us from going all the way? Which just the entire Class A landscape just wide open right now.
And just an update on Elkhorn South game. Elkhorn South just made it final, 35-20, the victory over the Bearcats. Hey guys, let's talk about your games. Clark, we're going to start with you. I mean, you had the earlier game at Burke Stadium and that doubleheader, and you had Omaha Burke and Lincoln Southeast. And I would say it was relatively defensive, like I think what was kind of expected. Burke came out in top 21-3. What'd you take away from there?
I was impressed by Burke's quarterback, Cooper Katsky. He's a senior. He's a transfer in from Cherry Creek, Colorado. 6'4", 215. He threw the ball well. He could run. They got a really good quarterback, and obviously, if you got a really good quarterback, you can go pretty far here. Southeast had some opportunities. They first drive they took it right down the field and had to settle for 3. They had another drive where they went down. They were down 14-3. They could have gotten within 14-10, had to settle for a field goal, got blocked, and then Burke goes down to basically put the game away. So Burke looks good. I know they Coach Paul Lamonji was afterward talking about, hey, we're probably surprising some people. Some people probably didn't think we were going to be here. So they definitely have a chip on their shoulder, and we'll see how they look against Westside, but they got some confidence for sure.
Yeah. How close do you think that Burke Westside matchup will be? Because obviously Westside won pretty handily tonight too.
Well, Luke, did Westside play Burke during the regular season? I should
No,
have
they
looked that
didn't.
up before.
Yeah, they didn't play.
They didn't play. So I don't know. I mean, I think Westside's probably, you give the edge to Westside there, but Burke, they have really good defense. Obviously, Devin Jackson leading the way there. They got some injuries that they're gonna have to deal with. One of their running backs went out this game, and a couple of their wide receivers are out. So hey, the way you look at Class A tonight, anything's possible. I mean, that could be a pretty good game next week.
And Westside did win over Papillion La Vista South 49-0. And Luke, a little bit opposite for your game, Gretna and Lincoln East. That one was a shootout. 59-42 was the final there in Gretna. In fact, that's the backdrop. You're there over there at Gretna Field.
Yep.
And I mean, what'd you take away from there?
I mean, definitely to me, the story was just the level of quarterback play. Both coaches after the game were just stunned at, Flores and Walters just going back to back. Over 100 combined points, just wild scoring here at Gretna. And, you look at the field just over there at midfield, there was where Noah Walters, he laid on the field for a couple of minutes after the game, just kind of getting all those emotions out. There were obviously a lot of hugs, a lot of emotions to go through for Lincoln East. This was a tremendous senior class that they had. Cooper Erickson, Jalen Welch, Billy Stevenson, a lot of those big playmakers on offense. And they came out to play today. The offensive output was good as always. Offensive line, some huge improvements from last week against Creighton Prep. But just Gretna, just the more complete team and able to come up with the big plays on defense when they needed it. A couple of huge turnovers. They had a big kick return as well. And to me, Gretna, I've seen them twice, seen them dismantle Southeast, seen them beat East in a shootout now. And I mean, geez, they look every bit kind of that state title team. They got a strong defense that gets turnovers, top-notch quarterback, good running game. And man, they're going up against Elkhorn South next week, the only team to beat them. So talk about motivation for Gretna.
Yeah, that certainly is going to be a huge matchup there between those two. If you had to give anyone an edge, who would you give it to?
It's obviously going to come down to health a little bit. I think Gretna stayed really healthy tonight, no injuries that I saw, and Elkhorn South been dinged up for a little couple of weeks. So why not? Let's say Gretna staying hot and winning that quarterfinal matchup.
There it is. There's the estimation, and I feel. And then the last big upset of the night is Grand Island defeating Creighton Prep 30-28. The Islanders getting it done on the road, and they will get rewarded with a matchup against Bellevue West the very next week. I mean, credit to the Islanders. They're always a tough out. I mean, I don't know how much you guys have watched Grand Island, but I mean, they're just a tough team who runs the ball, very disciplined. Their defense is usually very good. And it's really surprising considering how well Creighton Prep has been playing, especially defensively. And it turns out to be a 30-28 game. What do you guys take away from that win for Grand Island?
Yeah, we mentioned it on the podcast a little bit that this was not an easy draw for Prep by any means.
Yeah.
Grand Island, that is always a tough game. The style that they play, I think, very similar to Prep. So a little bit of strength versus strength there, and Grand Island coming out on top. But, you have to wonder if Prep was maybe looking ahead just a little bit. Obviously playoffs, you just got to be focused. You got to play a solid 4 quarters, limit those mistakes. And sometimes things just start spiraling and they don't go your way. And, Prep haven't had that for a couple of weeks now. They've steamrolled over all their opponents. So I think probably Grand Island just, able to deal with that adversity a little bit better. And just a great result for them. Really impressive to go on the road and pick up that win.
Jeff Tomlin always seems like he has his teams ready to play for the playoffs every year. So maybe we shouldn't be surprised.
Well, that mostly does it to Class A. Otherwise, everyone else kind of won handily. Going to Class B, I mean, that's the only real class that didn't have many shocks tonight. Omaha Scott rolled to victory, and then Waverly just demolished Omaha Northwest, Grand Island Northwest out there, 59-13. And I thought that was going to be way closer than that. I mean, obviously, I know Waverly's probably a little underseeded. They've been top 5 some portion of the year, but I would have expected Northwest to put in some competition there, but Waverly just rolled.
Yeah, I mean the physicality of Waverly is just something that stands out whenever you watch them. And Northwest, that's a team that always plays good playoff football. So yeah, it's just a total credit to Waverly. They've had some huge scoring outputs over this season, which is for a team that is always built on defense, that is scary. And man, Waverly Bennington next round, talk about two of the best lines, two of the best rushing attacks, just two solid Class B football teams. That is going to be a great matchup to watch.
Yeah, and I mean, they have that result there. And then Ashland Greenwood, the number 1 seed, getting tested 23-12. And of course, Adams Central was the state runner-up last season. I mean, again, we mentioned Prep Extra podcast, how chaotic and how insanely talented all these teams are in C1. And again, it just shows you right there, Ashland Greenwood getting tested right away.
Yeah, that's just kind of the style that Ashland has. They don't win a lot of games by 40 points. So I don't think they're going to be too upset with winning another close one at home. You saw undefeated Shattern. They lost their first round game. So they're going home. We said anybody in C1 can make a run. And it's certainly shaping up that way. That Ashland Pierce game as well. Man, these 1-9, 1-8 matchups, these are just so hard for these top seeds.
Yeah.
And Boone Central had I think even rally to beat Wayne. I mean, I think that was a 5-12 maybe. I can't remember, but Boone Central is in that mix too, right? And so they really had to survive tonight as well.
And it's actually farther apart than you originally thought, Clark. It's 3 versus 14.
3-14. There we
yeah.
go.
It makes it even better there with how those seeds are. And I mean, that's not a great draw in the second round. They get Columbus Lakeview, who rolled over Milford 42-20. And I think I mentioned this on the podcast as well. Columbus Lakeview is probably the hottest team, maybe in the state. They had 2 straight shutouts going into the playoffs, and they just roll by Milford 42-20 to set up that matchup next week. That one is going to be a dogfight.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, all these matchups in C1, you got Wahoo beating Auburn as well. All these teams that just kind of show up for playoff football. And yeah, I like both those teams, Wahoo and Lakeview. They could both make some noise in the next round as well.
Over in C2, our city schools, Lincoln Lutheran went to a victory over Gordon Rushville. That was a 6 versus 11 seed matchup. 31-15 was that final. We had Ron Powell out uncovering that one, but they get a matchup with number 3 Ord, who just steamrolled Centennial, another area school, 62-21. Guys, how would you evaluate that matchup between Lutheran and Ord?
Obviously, it's going to depend a little bit on Lutheran's health. Ron highlighted that in his story that they got a little bit dinged up today. But ultimately, I look at that Ord team. They're built on the run, which is one of the strengths for Lutheran on defense is stopping the run. So one of those great playoff battles, strength versus strength, see who comes out on top. Ultimately defending champs, they kind of got the heritage there. I think you got to give an edge to Ord in that matchup, but Lutheran has just total playmakers all over the field. They're playing great football right now on a long winning streak. So I don't think Ord is going to be too happy that Lutheran's coming to their place ready to give them a good shot.
Yeah, and then
I think Lutheran beat Centennial 28-21 early in the season. So that kind of gives you an idea. And obviously, Ord took it to Centennial. So, but obviously Lutheran's playing really well right now.
Yeah. And then the biggest upset in C2 tonight was won by Wilbur-Clatonia, the 13th seed, beating UTAN by a score of 27-26. So that kind of shakes things up a little bit. They will get Hastings St. Cecilia, who won 21-14 over Bishop Neumann earlier tonight. I mean, how would you guys how do you evaluate that upset by Wilbur-Clatonia?
Well, Wilbur definitely a lot better than their seed would indicate. They played a really tough schedule. They were in my top 10 for a lot of this season as well. So I definitely would consider them to have the quality of a top 10 team in C2 and put them right there, in the quarterfinal mix with those other teams. And I think that was a pretty good matchup for them against UTAN. Some similarities there in their style as well. So, credit to the upset win, but those two teams are pretty similar in quality to me.
And then in Class D, just breezing over there, Burwell won big, the number 1 seed. Howes Dodge beat LCC there. Lords came up with a big victory over Sutherland, 53-20. But in D2, there was a couple of upsets. Johnson Brock, the 12 seed, upsetting number 5 Riverside 40-22. And then a big shoot, and also BDS, defending state champions. They win their first round matchup. The 14th seed defeating Pender 36-28. And I guess, Luke, we predicted that BDS is one of the few teams who we had the least likely chance to repeat. And of course, they're like, oh, we're not going to listen to Luke and Jeff. They're just going to win their first round game.
Yeah, I mean, I think in both of those matchups, it just kind of shows that, being tested over the course of the regular season, it doesn't really matter if you take a couple losses. Like, if you're the better team out of those matchups, it's going to show down the line. And both BDS and Johnson Brock had some really tough games, took some tough losses against some of those other top 8-man teams. But, they're going up against these teams that are 8-0, only beating schools with losing records, haven't really been tested as much. And yeah, the playoff experience for BDS, that was always going to be huge and came out to show this week. We'll see if they can keep it going as that 14 seed, prove us wrong the whole way. But both those teams, just real solid 8-man groups, good coaching, and a good senior class leading the way.
And one to point out in D2 was Kennesaw and Sacred Heart, which obviously you guys knew would be a big game, and it was. I mean, Kennesaw won 50 or 62-50, and they trailed 30-14 in that game. So, in a huge game by Denkert, I think he went over 300 yards rushing. So that was probably actually the game of the night in D2. It wasn't an upset, but it definitely had a lot of excitement to it.
It stole us a rematch that it seems like they come up with every year between Humphrey St. Francis and Sacred Heart. Instead, it will be Kennesaw and St. Francis in the quarterfinals next week. And then another little upset, Mullen loses to Ansley Litchfield. Ansley Litchfield, the 11th seed, winning 50-42 in overtime. And that's kind of a little overall recap of what happened tonight. Plenty of action. It's what you live for Nebraska high school football. And guys, we have some game balls to hand out, our highlights, who we thought was our top performers of the week, especially with these playoffs. Clark, we'll start with you.
Yeah, let me get it up here because I want to make sure I got their names right. Yes, Sebastian Boyle and Raiden Stoll from Scotts Bluff. Sebastian went for 315 and 3 touchdowns, and Stoll went for 186, and he had 4 total touchdowns as Scotts Bluff beat Beatrice 54-21. I don't know about you, Luke. I thought that would be a little bit closer because I thought Beatrice was pretty battle tested, but Scotts Bluff put on a pretty good show with those two tonight.
Yeah, definitely. I've been really impressed by Beatrice. They got a real big offensive line, kind of getting back to that run the ball style that I'm sure you know all about, Clark. And, making that long bus ride, we talked about it. That was always going to be a challenge, but they went yesterday. So I think ultimately, it just shows Scotts Bluff, that rushing attack, just the quality all over the field. Man, they are going to be fun to watch in B. Yeah.
And Luke, we'll just go right along to your game ball.
Yeah, I hate not to pick a specific player or two, but I got to give it to the entire Omaha North football team. When you just consider that they started the year with that long losing streak, you could have totally quit at 0-5. Like, I don't know if we could have run some playoff probabilities, but their chances probably would have been under 1%. Just so slim, needing to win out. And then your reward is going to the undefeated #1 team. Got a Nebraska commit at quarterback, just talent all over the field. And they go in their place, stun them, just show up. The Williams brothers at quarterback and running back, they are a dynamic duo, running a little bit of that option offense and putting up 49 points on Millard South. Gosh, that's just incredible. 16-1. I mean, result of the night, and people are going to be talking about that one for a little while.
Yeah. And then to finish off with mine, I'm going to give it to Grand Island, especially the defense. They forced a fumble in the final few minutes to get the ball back and get the game-winning score to make it the 30-28 final. Prep, like we mentioned, was one of the hottest teams coming into these playoffs, and they roll into Omaha and upset the Junior Jays, who, of course, had state championship inspirations, one of those top-tier teams that was projected to go make a deep run. And the Islanders like, no, not so fast. We're pretty good football, too. So Islanders moving on to the next round, along with plenty of other upsets around the state. That's going to do it for the first Prep Extra Rewind show. We'll try to do this every week of the playoffs. We certainly hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at L Mullen, at X on Sports, and at Seagrell on Twitter, as well as at Prep Extra, where you can get all the coverage. We have state volleyball next week, of course, playoff football, Husker coverage. Everything you need is on journalstar.com, but Prep Extra for all your high school needs. From Clark Grell, Luke Mullen, I've been your host, Jeff Ekstrom. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.